look, we all know in an attention economy, what sells the most is probably outrage, anger, and those things. So how do you in your model avoid being captured by the rage of the townspeople? You know, how do you avoid pitchforks and torches?
Well, that's where we're really blessed, honestly. It's a right-left show. So, at any given time, a decent portion of the audience is mad.
And what are the other of us?
It works well.
It works really well.
We're going to be hated no matter what by some portion, yeah.
Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Weekly Show podcast. My name is Jon Stewart, the final podcast of the year. We will be gone for the rest of August, and I think coming back in early September. So been a delightful year. Obviously, tonight, I think, is the Wisconsin primary. We don't know what's going to happen. We'll probably discuss it during the episode, even though we have no idea what it's going to be. And then, we'll talk about the other things. It's the dog days of summer. There's not a whole lot going on right now. It's a little bit quiet. Senate is on recess, the House on recess. I am going to go away. I've got a lovely, like a snorkel vacation planned in this beautiful, crystal clear. I probably am not pronouncing this right. Hormuz, Strait of Hormuz, where we're going to see that's never going to fucking end. But we got a great show for today. I wanted to bring on a couple of folks that I feel like have been doing the kind of I'm on the left, I'm on the right discussion. I feel like they do it in a way that engenders good faith. And so I wanted to highlight them on today's program. So let me get to them right now. We'll discuss all things left, right, populist, and otherwise. Please welcome to the program the hosts of Breaking Points. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are, the final Weekly Show podcast before summer break. And we have the co-hosts of Breaking Points, Krystal and Saagar and Enjeti are joining us today to discuss all that is happening in the world. First of all, welcome, Krystal. Welcome, Saagar.
Thank you so much for having us, John.
Thanks for having us.
I want to start by saying I don't feel comfortable seeing you two in separate spaces.
We had a debate about that, actually, but it just was a little bit technically easier this way. So I'm sorry that we made you uncomfortable.
And same for you to see you at home in a t-shirt. It's throwing me off from my childhood.
Oh, dear God. If only you knew, Saagar, how painful it was for me to put on the suit for my 20 minutes a day and all that. That's actually why I left the show in 2015. I just decided, hey, man.
I couldn't take that anymore.
I'm done with the button down. This is over. But we're delighted that you're both here. And I want to ask you, because you're such an interesting dynamic. As you guys have worked together, do you find that your political opinions are starting to converge? Because I think the point of it is sort of at a guy a little bit on the right. Saagar, you'd worked at Daily Caller, you'd done some things. Krystal, more on the left. But as I listen to you guys, I find there is a great deal, not just of respect, but convergence. And I can't think of another show where sort of the idea is to get those contrasting viewpoints that has had that. Is that how you're experiencing it?
I would say it depends very much on the moment of the news cycle.
Yeah.
So if you had been watching us regularly leading up to Trump's victory or after Trump's victory, when we were talking about immigration and mass deportation and CCOT, or even today we had a big debate about like woke 1.0, you might get a different impression. But the concept of the show, from the beginning, even predating the current iteration of Breaking Points, was, okay, if we got the best faith interpretation of the populist right in conversation with the populist left, what would that look like? And my theory is that there would be different overlap than you might find on sort of the traditional like crossfire, to name a throwback.
I just got something just back of the neck, hairs.
The typical crossfire sort of cable news dynamic. And so I think that's what you're picking up on. And certainly on the Iran war, on changing the relationship with Israel, on, economic issues, there is a lot of overlap there.
I think the thing you said, Krystal, that resonates the most with me is best faith. good faith. I think, and Saagar, maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
I think that's what you're picking up on.
It might not be a convergence of opinion. It's that it's a good faith discussion.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we both really built our show around is like a rejection of cable news and just not only the format, but the very way in which they want to increase division. And we have plenty of division, which we showcase very openly and honestly, as you just pointed out, Krystal, about our Woke 1.0 debate. But in it, there was a good faith. I mean, Krystal heard me out and I heard her out and we gave our counterpoints. And there was no like yelling or screaming at each other. I also, whenever you're talking about convergence, I think that one of the things that really comes with respect is understanding. And so we've been doing this, not just this show, but our previous iteration of the show for almost like 7 or 8 years now.
What was the first one?
Rising.
It was Rising.
That's it, Rising.
Over at the Hill. And one of the things that comes with that is you come to understand very deeply where other people are coming from. And it's really useful because it helps not only in your interactions politically, but like even in your everyday life. Like when you hear somebody say something, you can understand where previously would have been like, what an idiot. You're like, okay, I see how you got to that conclusion because of the information you took in, or your worldview is just fundamentally really different than my worldview. And there's a level of acceptance with that. One of the best compliments that we both get, if we're in public or something, is like, you really helped my relationship with my dad. You just helped me understand like where my dad was coming from whenever he would rant about X, Y, and Z. Like I understood why, and then or vice versa. Like help my relationship with my kid, and like my kid's really into DSA, and like I don't understand, what that is. But when I hear Krystal talk about it, it's like okay, like I kind of start to make sense to me, and so in that way, it's really edifying, and part of the reason why I love doing the show.
As you've come together, and now it's been, as you said, I think 7 years, or does it help you also identify the bad faith actors in our political and media hellscape? Has there been a way for you to discern, these people are performative, these people are bad faith, and do you avoid that now, avoid those folks, or do you expose? What's your...
Both.
It's a mix. Yeah. I mean, definitely. That is certainly the case. And look, I have become less tolerant of a lot of pundits on the right. There are very few who are actually on the right that I would work with at this point, because I just think there's so much lies and propaganda there that to deal with that on a daily basis would not be productive. If you're doing a debate and you're having engagement, you're trying to expose, that's one thing. But to work together with someone every day, as you know, is an entirely different relationship. So, for example, in the wake of your John Fetterman interview, I don't think that is someone I could work with every day. Because there's
John Fetterman. I'm not sure John Fetterman is working with John Fetterman every day.
Just bad faith arguments, a lack of an ability to really even grapple with the questions that you're asking, et cetera.
Yeah.
But what has made it work with Saagar is we've had some very heated debates, very hot, and over issues that we both care a lot about and I think are very consequential. What makes it work over the long term is that we're both capable of saying, you know what, I got it wrong there. You were right. You had a point. And I think over the long term, that's part of what has built the trust that enables it.
I totally agree. And it's like, vice versa, I think, especially at the height of a lot of pretty crazy moments, 2020 and others. There are not a lot of people, I think, who I could have stomached. But yeah, I mean, as Krystal said, it can get hot, and that's fine. I actually think it's healthy. It's normal. It's reflective of literally the nature of the country. We're literally living through one of the most tumultuous times, I think, in modern American history. It's probably akin to the 1960s in a lot of different ways. Or actually, maybe the 70s is a better comparison.
Here's what's sad. I think I'm the only one who's lived through both of those.
That's true. I've only read about it, John.
If you have any questions, I am happy. I'm happy to tell you about it.
Right. But I mean, John, since you were there, know that was a moment of very actually limited public debate. And in my opinion, one of the reasons why things went really wrong was because of the convergence of the mass media era. Like for me, this is honestly surreal to be able to talk to you because you were so instrumental for me as a kid who is growing up in Bush country, hearing these lies about the Iraq War. There is only one place that I could go to expose like this level of hysteria and nonsense, which I just hear propagated all day long on all three cable networks. And that was at a time of total ubiquity in mass media, part of the reason that we got into the war that we did. And it went as long as we did. I think that the Iran war is a disaster, but it is a hopeful story in that the poll numbers went south immediately. A huge amount of the American public is getting their information from sources or different from sources like us, many others who are out there who are able to expose the absolute holes in all of the propaganda that the Pentagon or the White House is able to put out. And so, look, it's a disaster that we're in this, but it's actually a hopeful story that the public turned on it almost immediately. And so that we didn't have that edifice to prop it up that we did at that time.
Well, let me ask you a question, because it brings up sort of the incentives of those systems that created that. Because I think you make a nice point about the 60s and 70s being tumultuous in that same way. I think the Iran war has gone south in some ways because this administration doesn't respect us enough to lie to us.
Yeah.
They kind of don't give a shit what we think. And in the 60s and 70s, the lies were generally, media has found a way, the incentives of it, to get weaponized. Bad faith actors weaponize it, right? The ubiquity of cable news was at first, and TV in general, in the 60s and 70s, politicians weren't quite sure what to do with TV. And you remember the debate between Kennedy and Nixon. And Kennedy went out there and he understood that television is a visual medium. And Nixon was like, I don't need makeup. I look great.
He's sweaty and clammy.
Right.
Yeah.
And he got his ass kicked on the TV side. But if you listen to it on the radio, people thought Nixon won. Do you think it's, in some respects, the media has just, politics has figured out how to weaponize media? Is that fair to say? Like you just talked about all these bad faith actors, right? They exist as part of a political ecosystem, as a way of, Roger Ailes very famously said, I want to create something so that what happened to Nixon could never happen to another Republican president. Sometimes we separate media and politics, but isn't it true that in a lot of ways, there's a symbiosis? A lot of it's been co-opted by politics. And I'm curious what you think of that. And we can talk a little bit about breaking down those ecosystems.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, absolutely. And the amount of propaganda, the amount of lies, you go on Twitter, now X, and there's all these accounts that are just AI slop accounts feeding all kinds of nonsense. It makes it very difficult actually to sort out what's happening in the war, not to mention there's a total censorship lockdown on the U.S. as part of what is happening in the region. On the flip side of it, though, there's also a hopeful story there because in its best incarnation, they haven't been able to cover up the horrors and genocide. People watched that in 4K themselves, and they took their own moral opinion of what was happening there, and it went directly against what the bipartisan elite consensus had been for years and years. I think you're right that it's insulting that they didn't even bother to lie to us this time before the war. I think it also reflects the fact that Donald Trump doesn't feel that he needs to go through the mechanisms of democracy. We just have to swallow whatever insanity he's going to do. But I also think the fact that you have so many dissenting voices in new media that were critical from the beginning and able to expose the very thin level of propaganda that had been fed to us has also been a positive point. Now, I get concerned because there are also legacy media has its advantages. There was a real tradition and a firewall between opinion and and the journalist part and the advertising, and those walls fall down in new media. But overall, I think when you look at those two stories in particular, you can see that it has helped to create a better atmosphere for small d democratic understanding of what these wars and what this genocide actually are.
I think that's a really important point. And it's a double-edged sword, as Krystal said. I compare it to the invention of the printing press. I mean, that's how the internet, seriously, that's
You're
what the
going
internet.
old school.
Yeah, because, what did that actually do? Is it decentralized media? We literally had something called a 100 years war, a Protestant, Reformation, chaos, millions of people died. But of course, nobody would say, well, yeah, the invention of the printing press was bad. It was just, it unleashed a new medium of debate. Much of it was propaganda, actually pornography, one of the original inventions of the printing press, of mass distribution, just like the internet. But what it demonstrated, I think, on a long enough timeline was a more informed public. And that's the thing. We're working things out, as Krystal said, And this is where I think all of us can be upfront and honest. Like, we are in a difficult position because we are people who do the news, but Krystal and I are also business owners. We co-own our company, but we set, rules at the very beginning. We do not read ads, period, because we believe that if we did so, it could potentially compromise things in the future. Now, we know that we have sacrificed literally like multiple zeros of income. However, what we've decided instead was to build a more anti-fragile business. For example, like we have a premium subscription program, we have YouTube revenue, we have like dynamic ads, which are not ads that we read, which we have no negotiation or interest in, but it took a level of intentionality. However, though, there's no reason that we had to do that. If we wanted to read Manscaped ads, we could.
And most people are not doing that and are not going to do that.
No.
Yeah.
And most people are not doing that and are much richer than us as a result. But we believe in the long run it'll work
You're
out.
starting to make me sweat,
Yeah.
and it's why I look to Quince. Hey, folks, I know you're trying to figure out ways to skip through these little ad reads here. I get that. I know what you're doing. I know you're looking into that Spotify thing. Listen, I'm not blind, you bastards. And to be honest with you, I'm not crazy about reading them in the first place, generally, except for this one, ground news. I'm always going to go to bat for the ground news. Ground news, because it's, I hate the news. I hate what it's doing to me emotionally. I hate that you don't really know where the information is coming from sometimes. You don't know how it's being manipulated. And it adds to the creeping fog of sadness that grows. But I have to keep up. I have to understand what's going on in the world. And that's why ground news, they've got a website. It's an app. You can see how different news outlets will frame the same story. They've got a blind spot feed so you can challenge yourself about your news consumption. To get the same unlimited access to the Vantage subscription, go to groundnews.com/Stewart and subscribe to get 40% off. Discount only available for a limited time. That's groundnews.com/Stewart, or scan the QR code on screen. Saagar, so this is really interesting to me because we're talking about media independence. And when you think of independence, I think writ large, you think of it as media independence from corporate interest.
Uh-huh.
We're not owned by Universal or GE or any of these things. But independence is also, are you independent from a political motivation?
Yes.
That's another form of independence. And a lot of people, I think, are captured by that. But the third avenue of independence, and I wonder about this for you, is what are your incentives to the audience?
Yeah.
When you say we have a subscription model and all that, and do the incentives of, look, we all know in an attention economy, what sells the most is probably outrage, anger, and those things. So how do you in your model avoid being captured by the rage of the townspeople? How do you avoid pitchforks and torches?
Well, that's why we're really blessed, honestly. It's a right-left show. So, at any given time, a decent portion of the audience is mad.
And what are the other of us?
It works well.
It works really well. So
we're going to be hated no matter what by some portion, yeah.
Perfect.
We are very often hated by our own paying. We might have one of the most ignominious, honors of being often hated by the people who pay us. But that's built in, as I said. So at various different times, we've gone through these, types of events before. People are mad that you said X, Y, or Z. But because of our political independence and the right-left kind of dynamic that is baked in to the heart of the program, it means that there are always new people who also show up. That's one of the things where a lot of and you actually can see this, there's a lot of articles about MAGA media and how it's collapsing. As enthusiasm in MAGA and the project with Donald Trump, especially with younger men, starts to go down, people who went all in on just Trump alone or on right-wing so-called media are seeing a dramatic reduction in their overall revenue and views, because that's just not really what people want to hear right now. That is just not something that could ever happen to us, because Krystal would always represent a side of somebody who's critical of MAGA, right? Or, I mean, even I am, obviously, as well, but vice versa, let's say whenever Joe Biden was president. And so we're very lucky, honestly, in the way that we designed everything. But what you're laying out is a very real problem, and it explains grifterism, which is basically people who have to continue it going, manufacture and create new type of controversies purely for an economic incentive, which is enough of a cancer that we have today.
Yeah, I mean, audience capture is very real. You can kind of, if you're watching channels closely, you can tell who's just catering to their audience and what they think, an algorithm wants them to produce. But I also want to say, with regard to the fury and the pitchforks, like, I think people have good reason to be furious right now. I think both on an economic level, we've been thrust into this war that basically no one wanted, that is devastating for the global economy. It's first and foremost devastating for Iranian civilians. We have had our taxpayer dollars used to fund a genocide that, again, the public has vociferously turned against. And we have a system that is rigged by an oligarch class. So I think talking about those things, the way that the AI oligarchs literally want to take everyone's jobs, yeah, people should get angry about that. Those are things that should infuriate you. And so we don't shy away from that. I think to be informed right now is to be angry and furious about the state of affairs.
I agree.
Let me ask you, because it's such an interesting thing to point out how many real things there are that can shock the conscience of people. And yet, I think if I'm being fair about where the real energy of the debate is right now, it's whether or not Enes Kanter is going to get drafted into the WNBA. Like, the real outrage in this country and culture doesn't seem to be about those very real points you just articulated, Krystal.
Well, and to me, Saagar may have a different take on this, but to me, it's very obvious what's going on here. Trump's approval is in the toilet. His war is a disaster. The economic numbers are trash. People are furious. Republicans.
I think it's the greatest economy this country's ever had.
Oh, I forgot
Krystal.
about that. Yeah. Yes. According to Fox News, absolutely. Yeah. And Republicans are facing what is likely to be a landslide defeat in the midterms. So what are they doing? They're going back to the culture war bag of tricks. Here's a shiny object that I can dangle over at Fox News to get our own base back in line. But I actually don't think that that's what's driving, for example, the electoral results that we're seeing in Democratic primaries across the country and likely to see in the general election in the fall. To me, the number one issue is very likely the economy, but it's also horror at a foreign policy that is both expensive and deeply immoral.
Yeah, John, I would push back a bit. I agree with you.
What? How dare you, sir?
Well, I just think it's reflective maybe of a cable news bias, because you're right. I believe the WNBA was the second most mentioned topic on Fox News this week. And that's probably true of the 65 plus crowd if I were to go and ask them. However, the segments that perform best on our channel are things about the housing crisis, are about flock cameras, data centers, AI displacement and job loss, foreign policy. I mean, I never thought I would have my dream job of being able to speak to guys like Professor John Mearsheimer, who is my literal idol, for over like an hour and a half and have him describe like great power politics and the Iran war and watch millions of people want to engage with that type of content. And so I do think, like, look, are we amusing ourselves to death? Empirically, yes. I mean, not just in terms of sports, but with gambling and many of the other vices which are exploding in our current society. However, what we always also point out on the show, that is derivative of real problems like housing, which is the one I would say we see the most consistent rage in terms of not just our audience, but in our demographic, and is like downstream of so many of the other problems that we face like as a society.
Can I also just say, John, that I think too, the revelation, this will feel like a bit of a left turn, but the revelations in the Epstein files of the way that this powerful elite actually has this incredible class solidarity and the way that they operate, I think it's blown some of the lid off of this idea that, what we should really be focused on is trans people or these culture war debates, because we've been able to see the way the powerful actually work in the world and the view that they have of the rest of us. And so I think that has been a very educational and illuminating experience for people as well as they process some of these like new red meat culture war debates that are thrown into the mix.
Yeah, it's just hard to imagine, when we talk about and the importance of it, all these things that you're bringing up are truly important. And yet there's been no accountability for any of it.
Correct.
And it seems like what there is accountability for, either legislatively or otherwise, are culture war issues that, like, I'll give you an example. The SAVE Act being, at the forefront of so much of the problems that were going on in the Senate right now. And the liberals, they want illegals who are voting in millions of numbers not to, show an ID, just utter nonsense that gets thrown out there, or the trans debate as being at the forefront of what's in everybody's minds about like nuance is utterly removed through the process of our media and our politics. Yet the things that you talk about that are facing Americans or are making them question the legitimacy of our institutions are never addressed, seemingly with no accountability.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the core of our show.
Can I give you another example
Please.
of that, John, which is very much top of news cycle right now? So there's this whole controversy about Hassan Piker and whether or not candidates should associate with him. And Abdul Sayed famously had a rally with him, so he's being targeted right now as like, how dare you associate with this guy who said all these terrible things? The clip that they usually point to is where he says that we, quote unquote, deserve 9/11. He's talking about the concept of blowback, and for which he has since apologized. Meanwhile, Abdul Sayed is running against a guy who literally was in Congress after 9/11, who authorized the Iraq War, who supported mass surveillance, who defended torture, but where that guy is fine. But associating with someone who said something that was edgy one time, that's what's out of bounds. That's what should be off limits. That, not just me, but I think most people, is insane.
Well, I'll do you one better. J.D. Vance's spiritual advisor, the preacher that J.D. Vance considers one of his sort of spiritual advisors, talks about male dominion over women. There are all kinds of extremes in terms of association. I remember with Obama.
Just think about, though, the contrast between Hassan Piker said a thing in response to 9/11 versus this guy actually was in power and was involved in the horrific lies leading up to that war, the authorization of the war, the torture, the murder of Iraqi civilians. And so when you talk about accountability, where is the accountability for that?
None.
Where's the moral weight on that? Versus,
None.
I mean, many of these guys that were villains on your show when you were covering the Iraq War are still around today to propagandize us and push us in the Iran war. So I think that lack of accountability you point to is a big failing in our society. And in my opinion, it has to be corrected in the next administration. People have to go to prison for the crimes that were committed, whether it's rogue ICE agents, whether it's insider trading within this regime. That has to happen for us to reestablish anything approaching a healthy society.
And I will say, John, for me, I know I'm with two liberals here, so I'm trying to pick my battles.
How dare you call me a liberal?
Careful. Sorry, a leftist and a liberal. A leftist and a liberal. I'm gonna have to check on that JD Vance spiritual advisor one.
Hegseth spiritual advisor.
I was gonna say, I was like, I'm fairly certain that's not true.
That was Hegseth, but JD Vance was Peter Thiel, who, when asked by Ross Douthat, should human beings continue to exist,
long
paused for 8 seconds to be like, I don't know about humans, and has unbelievably, this the other people that are in those roles. My point being, guilt by association, which is often thrown in Democrats' faces, whether it was Obama's spiritual advisor, can be thrown into the right's faces, but it never seems to be done in that way.
Fair. What was it? Pastor Wright? Is that right? Pastor Wright? Now that I think about it,
yes, Pastor Wright.
That was a long time ago.
Oh, with Obama, you're talking about?
Yeah. Anyway, I think the vein I'm picking up on, and this is where I would say this is like the great disappointment, political disappointment of my life. As I said, I was inspired to get involved in politics because of Iraq, and the centerpiece of the 2024 campaign. And it's fair for people to say that you were fooled. Was no more foreign wars. I mean, the vice president, as you said, wrote an op-ed endorsing Trump's best legacy, no new wars. Stephen Miller famously said, Kamala will send your sons to war. A significant contingent in the 2024 campaign was, we are not going to war with Iran. And so to live in a reality where Trump dastardly and disgracefully attacks Iran under the cover of negotiations twice, kills 168 schoolgirls, delivers the greatest strategic disaster to the United States, potentially either since Vietnam or eclipsing it, if you talk to one of our guests, Professor Robert Pape, to live in that reality with those people who I really did trust. And I'm saying this on a personal level. I know many of them. I came up in politics kind of in the same cohort. It has been the greatest betrayal of my lifetime. And I think what's really disappointing is how much of it is clearly BS in that I believed that the voters believed that the wars were bad. And so to live in a reality where Thomas Massie, loses his House primary purely because of AIPAC and pro-Israel money and a boomer Republican base who, if you'd polled them under...
Well, and that Trump, let's
Trump,
not
right, of course.
deny that
100%.
Trump...
Right, those two together, those two forces together.
Saagar, I want to ask you a question, and I mean this, and this is for Krystal too. The dynamic that you're describing is a politics that distorts reality, that creates an impression, and then makes policy choices to ameliorate the damage of this false reality. And you're saying that your dividing line for that was Iraq and now Iran. I think maybe the disconnect here for whatever you would call liberals or the left or any of those things is that the entirety of Trump's operation has been that.
Is a con, is what you're saying.
That's right.
Yeah,
has been
right.
the same dynamic you're describing that has disappointed you in Iraq and Iran. I would say has disappointed me when you say the Haitian community is eating cats and dogs.
Right.
Well, that's the same immigration-wise as Saddam Hussein is using these aluminum tubes to enrich uranium, and that's why we have to go in there. In other words, the reason that has been given for so many of these policy decisions that I would disagree with is also a distortion of reality.
I think that's entirely fair, John.
So I find it interesting that but somehow Iran, it's like the whole Tucker Carlson of it.
Okay.
I've had enough. Really? Because it looks to me like it's the same shit that's been happening from day one.
I think that's entirely fair. Again, to take a step back, and I can only, from my perspective, the Haitian thing. Yeah, it was a lie. The truth is, a lot of us sat and swallowed it because we wanted less immigration. And we're like, okay, well, this highlights a topic and an issue which we can fight on. We can put the left on the back foot because, they want, mass amnesty, and we don't. And that was a tactical political decision that people in politics make all the time.
But I'm not even sure they want mass amnesty. I even think that's a red herring. I don't know that they do want mass amnesty, but we don't have a politics in this country that's functional enough or literate enough to have an actual conversation about what immigration in this country should look like.
I think that, again, I totally take your point, and this is the most common...
Look at me!
Yeah.
Come on!
My parents are loving this. My parents are loving this. Me being put in my place. But I do think, with the Iran thing, and again, I can explain it from my perspective, which was these were people whose entire careers, literally, were kind of built on opposition to the neoconservative agenda. And did we know Trump is a liar, a con, often says various different things? Absolutely. Many of us knew that or would say it in private. What we also knew is that in his first term, he was incredibly deferential to a lot of his staff. A lot of the people we were hiring, he was hiring, I knew for a fact, at the very least had a genuine belief we shouldn't go to war with Iran. So, but what was extremely blackpilling, to use an online term, was to see those same people have to defend the war and in some cases use, Iraq rhetoric. I remember the vice president who I'd seen give lectures against the war with Iran or, against, neoconservatism. He was in the Oval. It was in the middle of the Iran war. And he's like, it's like a suicide bomber. We're not going to wait till the suicide bomb goes off to disarm it. And I was like, oh my God.
We don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud, right?
It's Condoleezza Rice all over again. I actually couldn't believe it. And then, Mark Thiessen is back on my television screen and Ari Fleischer is back on my television screen. And the same liars, who are justifying this, and to watch that happen, I would say, fine, I was fooled. I didn't think it would. I thought that the lesson was learned. And there's a major mea culpa that has had and has to be had by people who thought that it would be different and said so publicly. So that's kind of where I am currently.
Krystal, what do you think of that? Because it's hard for me to hear a mea culpa about an Iran war when the entire regime is that. There's an inevitability to the reality distortion field and the actions that they take based on a reality that they are creating.
Yeah. Well, this is something Saagar and I have had it out over on our show quite a lot and have sorted through in many conversations. And I've certainly had my I told you so's. And in fairness to Saagar.
It's not even an I told you. I don't mean it that way. Honestly, it's not that.
No, I get what you're saying, though. And I think one of the biggest differences in my view going into Trump 2.0 and Saagar's view, apart from the fact that we have different ideologies, and so we have different things that we consider to be good or bad, specifically on immigration in particular. But Saagar's view was that there were institutional constraints the first time, and there will be some institutional constraints this time.
That's true.
I looked at what had been done in the offseason, whether it was Project 2025, whether it was all of the plans to mass fire government workers, whether it was the Supreme Court taking control of the Supreme Court and then the Supreme Court giving Trump a green light to commit whatever crimes in office that he wants to, whether it was the mass loyalty test and fealty that he demanded that people back up his 2020 election stolen lies. I looked at that and said, no, this is going to be gloves off. It is going to be a most maximalist version of what he would want to do, of what his id is, and it's going to be horrifying. Now, even I don't think could have anticipated all of the Doge and CCOT and murdering random fishermen in the Caribbean. I could have anticipated and did anticipate the Iran war, but those were, I think, two of the very different frames that we had coming into this. And, for me, I'm very much caught between people who now are seeing some of the problems. I want to say, great, come along. But I agree with you that there has to be some reckoning with, okay, how did you get it wrong? And again, I think Saagar has actually done this, but how did you get it wrong? How did you end up in this place? And what are we doing going forward? Because if you're now just all of a sudden pretending like you had nothing to do with his rise, if you aren't reckoning with the other lies and horrors that unfolded during Trump 1.0 and in the offseason and in the buildup to Iran, then it's going to be very difficult to have any sort of coming together or certainly coalition formed around that group.
I only eat food now that afterwards I can swim in the bowl that I ate it in. Can you imagine if your cereal bowl was literally big enough you could eat your cereal and then go for a quick dip? Oh, the time I would save. But I got to tell you, this Magic Spoon, man, it's healthy food. Cereal, imagine that. Cereal, but healthy. It's Magic Spoon, changing the game. They got 13 grams of protein for those of you going through the change of life, as I am, where you get the old sarcopenias. As they come in, you got to get that muscle up. You got to get that protein. 0 sugar, by the way. 5 grams of net carbs per serving. That's low. So you got a lot of protein, no sugar, and not that many carbs there. Great breakfast, late night snack, post-workout fuel, wake up in the middle of the night weeping. It's a great time to console yourself. They got granola, they got snack bars. Come on, man. Don't make me beg. Look for Magic Spoon on Amazon or at your nearest grocery store. And there are plant-based versions of the cereal too. Even vegans get to feel like they had a childhood. You'll find vegan options at Whole Foods or get $5 off your next order at magicspoon.com/TWS. That's magicspoon.com/TWS for $5 off. My concern is that this awakening is actually just strategic.
What do you mean by that?
So, all right, let's go to the photograph in the Cracker Barrel, the Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson photo of the diaspora, the Republican diaspora, those that have woken, and the Iran war, and now they sit in this room and they're going to come up with this is the real Make America Great Again. That was fake. That we enabled it. We worked our asses off to amplify the lying, to help create a reality distortion field that has given us all of these bad outcomes, from invading Iran to a shitty reflecting pool because they're all one and the same. They're part of the same process, quite frankly.
Uh-huh.
It's all the same. It's the real great replacement theory. Let's take all the partisans and replace them with ideologues because partisans are part of the game. Ideologues are a whole different version. And now what they've done is they've created a little isolated group that can say, oh no, we didn't go along with it. So whoever kind of rises up to next lead MAGA, that group can bless and provide cover to say, oh no, these guys have it right now. This is the real MAGA, and we'll provide cover. And I don't think any of it isn't intentional. I think the entirety of the design of this, and it's not just the last 10 years, it's the last 50 or 60 years.
So, I mean, obviously a very cynical interpretation. I know some of the people, I think...
Please tell me why I shouldn't be cynical about that interpretation. Please tell me why these bad faith actors are suddenly acting in good faith.
You have every right to think that. I don't think that there's nearly the incentive that you necessarily are... Like, you have people who all lost their elections and are not exactly like... Or let's say in Marjorie Taylor Greene's and Thomas Massey's case, like actually lost their entire careers. Or Joe Kent, for example, who I know personally, and is not somebody who's...
I don't think they're the progenitors of it. I think Tucker is. I think he's the one who has to be... He feels he must be... It's very telling. He said, I couldn't believe how little influence I have. Mm-hmm. His whole thing is, I have to be in proximity to power.
Look, I've known Tucker for a long time. I just don't really agree with that analysis, having spoken to him. I would say that he does feel genuinely burned by Donald Trump, not just with Iran, but actually with a lot more. I know you're skeptical. I think
how are you burned by a guy that 10 years ago you said, this man is corrupt to the core and I hate him? How are you burned by that?
Sure. I mean, the vice president said that as well. I think, right? People could change.
Right. And is also a cynical person manipulating himself into the halls of power. You can't convince me otherwise because I've seen no evidence of it.
Let's take the vice president out, because you're right. He's literally the vice president. So he had something to gain. I don't see necessarily the same Tucker gain. I guess whenever it comes to the third party, or let's even take the Trump criticism, I again think it's genuine. It has lost him any like genuine friendships, cachet, I think, in terms of his ability to project power in a Republican Party. I mean, I'm not sure if you've seen some of the approval polling on Tucker, like after Trump
Did they do approval polling on pundits?
They did. Yes, they did, because they were testing this exact theory of what you're discussing, which is like, hey, does Tucker independently have juice amongst Republicans without Trump? And his net negatives went much higher. Obviously, he's independent on his show, like in terms of his, like, away from partisanship or his own economic situation. But
Saagar, the same could be said about Republicans who were apostate about the Iraq War. In other words, people look to the future. Mm-hmm. And he's always been a guy that has looked to what's in it. Look, explain to me a guy who says, I'm all about liberty and America and make America great again. And you know who's really a great leader? Putin. Like, there's an incoherence to this that has to be cynical because it's incoherent.
I understand how you get there, but again, but it's like and this is kind of like because I work with Krystal, like I could see your brain pathways and how you get there. So I'll explain the way that we would get there, and the way we would get there is like Tucker, or not even just Tucker, a lot of MAGA, and you're talking about Putin, I assume, in terms of like the war in Ukraine or admiration or whatever for the Russian system, some of which, by the way, I do think goes too far. But a lot of it is about
some of which.
No, I'm saying in terms of like people who like, like Russia is the, this pinnacle of Western greatness. And it's like, well, just look at their demographics and their economy. Like, that's not exactly true. But the point that I think where it came from, again, just to try to explain this, is a lot of the original 2016 energy, in particular, was a Buchananite rejection of globalism. And in particular, I think what people tried to see in Putin, or / like admiration or whatever of Putin, or the Russian system was somebody who stands athwart like the neoliberal West, right? So if I were to look at it through that frame, it's a little bit different. Like, I don't think it is necessarily as incongruent as you're thinking, because if you're a nationalist and your primary, view of the world is that sovereignty itself is one of the things that you should promote, and not just promote, but to cherish and to hold dear as much as possible, then you're going to look at different countries which have rejected like a Western global hegemon and say, oh, that's admirable, I guess, in a sense. Again, I'm not saying I agree with this.
Sure.
But I'm trying to explain how somebody would get there.
Well, Krystal, let me ask you, because it is, this gets us into a whole other thing, but maybe this is the distinction between left-wing and right-wing populism. Because I always think of populism through a much more economic lens, but there really is a nationalist lens that you have to look through it as well. And the thing that's interesting about the right-wing populism is, and again, I view it as cynical. It's the Bannon theory of power. I'm going to combine left-wing economic populism because I think that gives me a large group of people to pull from. And I'm going to combine it with right-wing, we must protect white Anglo-Saxon culture and Western civilization, which is their, I guess, sort of euphemism for that homogeneity. I think the second part of that, the white homogeneity, is more important to them than the economic populism. And the reason that I think that is because they didn't tell their judges to be economic populists. Like every Supreme Court decision that comes down basically favors corporate interest.
Yeah.
Rather than workers' interest.
The economic part of it, at least, putting the voters aside, but in the expression of right-wing populism in Trump and I would say other right-wing populist leaders around the world, the economic part is basically fake. I mean, this has been an incredible administration for billionaires in the oligarch class. They've never made more money or had more power or been deregulated. They're getting everything they want. And that's part of why it was easier for Trump to take over the Republican Party than it has been for the left to take over the Democratic Party, because the left-wing populism, that class dynamic you're talking about, that is the whole thing, right? It is, in populism, you're basically doing the people versus who is the villain. For the left, the villain is the billionaires, it's the trillionaires, it's the Epstein class, it's the oligarchs. For the right, it's typically, to frame it, I think you're right in your framing. There's usually a lot of, scapegoating of various minority groups. And so you can use a sort of slopulist, faux populist rhetoric when it comes to the economics, but that has all been cast aside. And in Trump 1.0, it was as well. I mean, their biggest economic accomplishment was this big tax cut for the rich that was cooked up by the Heritage Foundation and Paul Ryan. So I think that is an important distinction here. And I think that's increasingly becoming clear to many Americans, which is why Trump's approval rating on the economy is in the toilet, why there is such disgust with him, why you see this real rise of left-wing populist candidates who are overcoming a lot of money and establishment rejection of them and, attempts to smear and demagogue against them. But they're able to succeed anyway because the establishment has lost so much credibility with the Democratic base, and also because these economic and oligarchic forces have become so abundantly apparent to so many Americans.
Yeah, John, and I think, look, again, I hear your critique, and I've had my mea culpa.
By the way, Saagar, you really are your way of dealing with me is exactly how now I'm going to go home and deal with people in my family. I hear what you're saying.
Right. I see how you got there.
I see how you got there.
I mean, because I spend my time with Krystal and
I've been in that way, Mo, and I understand. It's taken you.
Right.
Yeah.
You took one route, we're taking another.
Exactly.
Route. If you were to take my route, my preferred route. So, you're you're imbuing kind of an ideology of just in your original analysis there about economics and about white identity politics. But I actually think, and I would take it further, is it's actually worse. It's really just about Trump. And I think it really took the Iran war to fully kick that in for me, is that the voters fundamentally, they just really like Trump. And it's actually not as much about policy or any of the things that you might type of think. I really hit home for me in terms of, like, when I talk to some of these people still all on board the Trump train, especially the older voters, they really just love how he drives people like you crazy. And that's actually just all it is.
That may be the saddest thing I've ever heard.
But it's true. It is kind of empirically true, is what you see is like liberal cultural rejection of Trump.
He hates the right people.
Or no, he's hated by the right people. That's actually what it's about.
All right.
And so that's the truth, I think, at the beating heart of a lot of the remaining MAGA coalition.
So if we start to like him, they'll abandon him?
I don't know about that. The damage has probably been done, but I don't know if they would cling necessarily as hard as you think. But this is where, though, to kind of break my own analysis, the one thing that does appear to quote unquote trump that is the economic situation, which is a validation, I think, of the economic framework of what you're talking about. For the very first time, we see Trump's net approval rating with Republicans on the economy begin to dip down as a result, both of the way that the tariffs were handled and because of the Iran war and $4 gasoline. That is beginning to pierce what I would say is the cultural veneer. And it already has, definitely, for a lot of, let's say, the younger men or voters who went along with Trump in 2024.
But I'd rather talk about the designers of this program than those that have to live through it. I think I'm talking more about the designers.
Okay.
That the Project 2025 designers, there is a Christian nationalist bent to it that I think is the driving force of it. And everything else is strategic and intentional about how do we get there? How do we get to the power? How do we get to control everything when our ultimate goal is that?
So I think it's much more economic. And even Project 2025 itself is kind of a complicated story, right? Because Project 2025 was written by the Heritage Foundation. It was explicitly disavowed by Donald Trump on the campaign trail, who was like, I have nothing to do.
Come on, man. Now you're.
I'm not saying it was real. I'm saying he disavowed it, correct? Like he did.
But cynically, he didn't disavow it. He gave it plausible deniability. As he does with, that's my point.
Okay.
Is when you act like, wow, this Iran thing really caught me off guard. And then you tell me, with earnestness, oh no, he disavowed 2025. He did nothing of the kind. He in no way wanted to deal with the particulars of it because he knew how politically damaging it was.
No, I was about to get there. So I was saying he disavowed it only then to hire many of the people who were signatories of Project 2025. So there wasn't an acknowledgement going into the campaign that this is politically damaging, this type of product, the Heritage Foundation, etc. But then that became the general policy, at least in some areas. It's been kind of complicated because a lot of it is just Trump himself deciding what the tariff rate on China should be whenever he wakes up in the morning. I'm not joking. That's actually how it works.
When he didn't like a conversation he had in Switzerland, and he was like, 50% on chocolate.
Right. Yeah, 50% on chocolate and watches. For the watch community, that was devastating as a member of that. So, when we talk about the designers, I don't know if it's as intentional, though, as you say. I do think all political coalitions have people who are insider organizations in Washington who are jockeying for power. That's literally the job of the Heritage Foundation or of these neoconservative think tanks. So you're saying, what you're talking about, how you think the Iran war came out of nowhere, that's kind of a foolish thought. But it's just really hard for somebody who lives in the town, knows some of the most senior appointees or some of the people who were there, who in private and in public spoke against war with Iran, made good cases against war with Iran, why we should disengage from the Middle East, to say that that was disingenuous the whole time. I'm still just having a hard time with that.
No, what I'm saying is not that it was disingenuous. And I'll ask you this, Krystal. The idea wasn't that they really didn't believe they would go in Iran. My point is that all these other policy decisions that have gone along with the intentional design of moving us more towards this intentional heritage American version, non-creedal America of a people who belong here more than other people, who are more American than other people, real America. That's all been driven by a very intentional planning group that is trying to figure out ways to maximize their power. And in doing so, have created this group that is manufacturing a reality to get them to do that. Now, the Iran war, whether it fits into that framing or not, that's the reality of it. It's a cynical manipulation to get to a certain goal. And my problem is, and Krystal, I'm going to ask you this, is it your problem as well that you look at this sudden, like, I can't believe the tiger ate my face, when the rest of us have been faced with this cynical manipulation of policy the whole time?
Yeah.
Whether it got them the results they wanted on immigration, but not the result they wanted on Iran.
Yeah. I mean, at the risk of ganging up on Saagar, I feel very similarly to you.
No. And by the way, and then we'll talk about how the left sucks. So
okay, we'll do that in a moment.
Yes.
But no, I mean, look, I look at the track record from Trump 1.0. I look at J.D. Vance's speech, to your point, about the heritage American, Christian nationalist vision for the country. His speech at the RNC, where he laid down an explicitly blood and soil conception, said America is not an idea. And then you look at at Stephen Miller, who is so powerful that he's been called the prime minister within the administration. And this guy is a diehard ideologue who loves to Nazi post on Maine. There is no doubt what his priorities are. So far, as Trump even has said, this guy would like there to just be 100 million people in the country that all look like him. So it's not a secret what his priorities are. And he's been given a free hand in order to execute that sort of policy. So I think you have that strain. And then I think you have Trump is just the most self-dealing, corrupt person on the entire planet, who also has Kushner and Witkoff and these other characters who are also focused on looting and self-dealing as the other primary impetus within the administration. And I think when you put all of that together, and also Trump's desire to be this big man in history, and he wants this world-changing legacy, whether that is for good or for ill, I think that's part of what explains the Iran war in particular. But when you put the ideologues together with the self-dealing, together with the total lack of any guardrails on this train at this point, that's how you end up with this situation. And yes, to your point, I mean, not only was it predictable, it was predicted.
Mint Mobile. And it's important that you throw in the mobile there, because Mint, we all know what that's about. But Mint Mobile, what we're talking about here is a phone company that's delivering you their product for less than what other phone companies are doing. I don't know what you want out of a phone company. What I want out of a phone company is deliver me a good product for less and don't bother me. Well, Mint Mobile plan, $15 a month. $15 a month. What is it? 1992? $15 a month. High-speed data, unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You want to bring your current phone and your current number? Do it. Get rid of your overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile. It's not diabolical. It's just good value. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/TWS. That's mintmobile.com/TWS. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/TWS. That's it. There's no catch. So given all that, and I think that's a summation that I would not disagree with, why is it that the Democrats are having such a difficult time? They don't control anything. They don't control the Senate. They don't control the Congress. They don't control the court. And they don't control the White House. So what is it about the way that Democrats have governed that has allowed this, in my mind, cynical and corrupt experiment to take such hold? And when will accountability come for that? Because I don't think that Trump arose for no reason. I think
Agreed.
People were dissatisfied with a government that did not seem to be responsive to the needs of the people and was at a remove.
Yes, I agree. And I think what we've seen at this point is a sort of limp, status quo, decorum-obsessed liberalism. is not going to be sufficient to fight what I see as rising forces of fascism in the country. They weren't historically. When we had a previous rise of a fascist movement in this country, it took FDR, it took the New Deal coalition, a sort of experiment in social democracy here in the U.S. to beat that back.
Forget about rising fascism, though. How about just like rural broadband? Like I'm not even talking about a party that is not up to the task of fighting the Nazis.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a party that is not up to the task of competently governing and easing the difficulties that people are facing in their day-to-day lives, not being responsive to their needs.
Mm-hmm.
See, I would pick up on that.
Not only not responsive to their needs, but actively gaslighting them about their needs. I mean, we could go back to the financial crisis and the response to that.
Yes. Okay.
Which was too little, where there was zero accountability to Wall Street criminals, where homeowners were completely screwed. And you can see the seeds of that dissatisfaction. And now we've got two generations, millennials and Zoomers, and soon it'll be Gen Alpha as well, who are being shut out of the American dream, who can't aspire to buy a house, who see education costs. They're told to go get a college degree. That college degree is wildly expensive. They're saddled with debt, and then they can't get a good job out of it. A bunch of AI oligarchs are telling them they're going to take their jobs anyway. And there has been a wildly insufficient at best response from the Democratic Party establishment, who've been more interested in palliative care for America and the working class of America in particular than actually solving problems.
Wait, they put us in hospice?
And governing, pretty much, and governing effectively. And so, one of the things that we've seen in the small pilot experiment of Zoran Mamdani in New York City, where, look, you're the mayor of a city, it's a big city, but you've got limited powers, is I do think you see a different approach to governance where there's a real commitment to, no, we're going to make promises, we're going to deliver on those promises. People are going to feel the impact of government in a positive way. I'm sure you probably saw the story. Someone posted a picture of a pothole on, I think it was Instagram, and by the end of the day, he had come and filled that pothole. It's something small, but it makes people feel like, oh, the tax dollars that I'm paying, the government that I elected, they actually are trying to make my life better in a way that materially improves my quality of life. And Democrats have become completely divorced from that. And then, the other part of this, of course, hangs over all of it is money in politics. I mean, this is really the root cause of so much of it, where they are beholden to corporations. They're beholden to special interests, whether it's APAC or big tech, et cetera, that keeps them at odds with the needs and the desires of the American people. And so that's why I've been so heartened to see this reckoning that is happening between the Democratic base and the Democratic establishment in the party.
Saagar, how do you see the left now? Do you buy into the framing? There's a lot of talk about now they're socialists, and very rarely does anyone ever talk about what socialism is. It's just a word, and no one really describes, in terms of specific policy, what's socialist about it. How do you see the left? What would be your, greatest criticism of them, and what would be your fix to that? How could you see them recovering from that?
So, I mean, look, I do not speak for the right. So I'm a very unique person. I don't really care about Hassan Piker. I did an event with him. He was fine. We were perfectly cordial. I actually think he's not nearly as radical as a lot of people think that he is. And so, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer, but like from my perspective, here's what I would say is that fundamentally what I think, you guys talked about, there's been a lot of like, oh, cultural issues and all of that are nonsense. At the end of the day, there's only one movement in recent history that won households under $100,000. That was Donald Trump in the 2024 campaign, which he won the popular vote. The DSA and leftists is predominantly a coalition of downwardly mobile white liberals. A lot of people who don't have a 4-year college degree find the movement distasteful or distrust them. We saw that just what happened in the Abdul El-Sayed campaign in the primary election, where you had older black voters of traditional political constituency and households that don't have 4-year college did not vote for him.
But still vote. I mean, that was a Democratic primary, but go ahead.
Right, but that's emblematic also in the general election results of 2024. So if we try to transpose those two things, the most likely predictor of what your politics are in this country is whether you have 4-year college degree or not. And if 4-year college degree is also correlated highly with income, the Democratic Party, while may having economic positions that supposedly benefit the working class, is not convinced the working class of
Yes.
that. That's just empirically true.
Right.
And so that's kind of like my criticism, if you will. If it's, Krystal gave her speech, so I'll give my worst case, my worst faith interpretation would be it's class cosplay. I mean, fundamentally, it is cosplay of dressing up, said, basically woke one type policy and or rhetoric.
To explain that, what is
woke one?
What is,
this is a whole thing, right?
I mean, also let's be fair. Like,
I
mean, Trump is the one who puts on the apron and sits in the McDonald's window. Like, talk about cosplay. Like, I don't think anybody does it.
Depends what type of cosplay we're cosplaying.
How many times can you hear he's a blue collar billionaire, and you're like, yeah, I don't think that's a thing.
He's cosplaying Norman Rockwell America, obviously, which is highly effective. All right, so you have to grapple with that if you want to win in American politics today.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think, and we're to the whole woke one debate, and Krystal and I literally had it today.
Yeah, tell me what you mean by that, because I'm not sure I understand.
So AOC recently went on television and she said, quote, woke one was crazy. And it was in relation to Francesca Hong, who's a DSA candidate who is very likely to win, I think tonight,
Wisconsin,
in the primary
right? Yeah.
in Wisconsin in the gubernatorial election, in which I don't have the exact tweet in front of me, had said something along the lines of critical of Thanksgiving. She gives an interview in which they said, so do you want to cancel Thanksgiving? And gives a word salad level of an answer.
Right.
Okay, might seem nonsensical. John, you and I both know that in this country, that is not exactly how you're going to appeal, quote unquote, to the very working class that we're talking about.
My favorite holiday.
Yeah, it's most people's favorite holiday. It's most normal people's favorite holiday. And so that comes across as deeply disconnected and obsessed with, what some activist is either going to say towards you, or your genuine belief that Thanksgiving, or just like white society, which she's also talked a lot about her own like biracial son and potentially being ashamed of that. Like, that is deeply off-putting, I think, to a lot of people. And so that is where, like, to the extent that I have a critique, I guess, is they're saying, oh, woke one was crazy. And it's like, no, but you still believe many of the things that woke one consisted of.
She's still saying that now?
No. What I'm saying is AOC had said woke one was crazy, as in the rhetoric that we use, there was an Overton window. And she made it clear that much of the rhetoric that was used from 2020 was bad. Oh, right?
Okay. All right. I see what you're saying. Was dumb.
And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But, kind of, John, as you're saying, if the rhetoric was bad, well, what about the idea? Like, do you still believe, like, in defund the police? Zoran had explicitly apologized to the cops and said, no, I'm sorry I said that. Right? And so, okay, that's fine, for people like
But
me.
isn't on the flip side of that, going through people's old tweets, isn't that what the right hated about?
Absolutely fair. Fair. You're right. It's part of cancel culture. Has the right embraced cancel culture? Yes. Especially whenever it comes to anti-Semitism and all of this.
Or Bud Light. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is so much of woke now or cancel culture or anything also just the ubiquity of social media, meaning we've democratized criticism. So social media makes its money on outrage, conflict, all those different things. Isn't it just a reflection of there is no such thing as non-cancel culture, because everything that you say, somebody will try and seek advantage of it and highlight it and amplify it to help them do that.
Certainly.
And I also don't understand how the idea that, well, she said Thanksgiving should be canceled, so she's crazy. But he said Trump won the 2020 election, but that's fine. We're all just gonna go along with the.
Well, is it fine though?
Like, well, no, but I'm saying like it is.
I think people who say that get plenty of criticism, though. I don't think it's fine. I don't think that's true.
Get it, but they get criticism, but there's no accountability. It's not like they don't still get confirmed by the Senate. It's not that they can sit in a confirmation hearing.
For example, Mike Rogers is an election denier. And I haven't seen all the hand-wringing about like, oh my God, is he going to be able to win and, win over moderate voters because he's such an extremist on this?
See, I'm not sure that's true. I see that story like 2 days ago.
What I've heard is all about how extreme Abdul is because, oh my God, he hung out with Hassan Piker. How dare he? Versus Mike Rogers, who actually holds these views himself and has expressed them multiple times. That's not framed as being too extreme for a moderate voter.
But I'm sure he doesn't actually hold those views, Krystal. He doesn't. Again, It's cynical. He doesn't actually hold them. I'm sure he's not an idiot.
Right. But it doesn't really matter at the end of the day whether he believes it in his heart of hearts or whether it's a cynical posture. He's going to act and behave in the same way because he's going to be a rubber stamp for Donald Trump at the end of the day. So, no, I think woke is, and especially the current iteration of woke coming from the Trump administration.
Now, what's the current if that's woke point 1, what's woke point 2?
Well, that's, I
Great
think,
question.
up for debate. But currently we're living through a Trump regime that wants to crush any sort of dissent. The place where they've come down the hardest is on any sort of criticism of Israel, which is characterized as being anti-Semitic. And they've used it as an excuse to jail, to crush protests, to deport. And, as part of their NSPM 7 project, they also use that to label you as effectively a terrorist and subject to, potential government action and surveillance. So it goes far beyond some like social media cancellation campaign at this point. And
Right.
I think really does expose how, at its core, this is really about controlling the bounds of debate, about scaring people into compliance, against an unpopular policy, and about maintaining power. So I think that's the way that it's really been deployed by Trump.
Does that sound like woke 2.0 to you, Saagar?
This is the difficulty. I
Yep.
accept Krystal's entire critique as that is the definition of woke. I've described the anti-Semitism, freak out in the administration as like Ibrahim X. Kendi's dream come true, like going after, universities and saying you're not sufficiently and not anti-Semitic enough. I think it's outrageous. I think it's obviously a violation and all of that of free speech. Woke 2.0 is what I think is, for example, Abdul El-Sayed, the candidate in Michigan, literally claimed that he'd never said defund the police. He did say it. He lied about that. Now that's an important thing. But John, he said it, and he lied that he didn't say it. He deleted his tweet, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And that may not be objectionable to you, but it certainly is objectionable.
We've all lived through the campaign ads of guys on the left having to like walk with police and go like, it's actually they're quite nice.
Well, I actually think that's healthy and good because it establishes good norms in society as opposed to like wanting to defund and or ban police.
Well, I never understood why progressives reject public safety as a non-progressive value. I always look at it as, don't people in the most economically devastated areas deserve the same level of law and order that people in Beverly Hills enjoy? I never understood why you would hold back on that. But Saagar, the anti-Semitism thing is kind of interesting to me as someone who's received pretty good anti-Semitic stuff and been accused of being it myself. If you look at the Twitter feed, I'll always get like, you're a dirty Jew, along with you're a capo. Like, you get it all. I'm interested on the right, this idea of, they fight anti-Semitism when very clearly they hire people. There's the Young Republican Club in New York where they go through their chat history and it's just vile, like flat out anti-Semitism. Or J.D. Vance will say, look, the Nazi jokes, who doesn't like to have a Nazi joke? I don't think we should hold that against people, while basically forcing universities to pay them millions and millions of dollars. It's, again, can you understand why the whole thing feels cynical?
Sure. Yeah. And you're right, because it is cynical, because it's not about anti-Semitism. It's about Israel. That's what it's about. It's about the unholy alliance.
But can't you understand now how writ large the whole operation seems cynical?
Yeah, but I would say that a lot of Democratic stuff is just as cynical, right? And so you'd have to tell me those. You'd have to make those points to me as well, right? And I could tell you what's cynical and what's not. Mm-hmm. But I don't hear a lot of specificity in the criticism. 100% fair. How much time do we have? I think
not much. You're busy people.
Yeah, I think I do want to pick up on the anti-Semitism point,
sure,
just because I do want I want this to be emphasized. Is it does expose the lie at the heart of it, as you just said, that any of this is really about anti-Semitism or any genuine concern. It's about Israel, and it is just the pro-Israel alliance with the Trump administration. And, Krystal, you eloquently, talked about woke 2.0 and how it's about power. I think woke 1.0 was also about power, cultural takeover in order to defend a unpopular policy. So I think they both have two things in common. And in both cases, I think both are genuinely not about what they allegedly were, supposed to be, anti-Semitism and or racism. I think both are about cultural power, who gets to have said power in our society. Again, I would say I would never have predicted it, Jon. And perhaps that's the dupe in me, but how can you come up with people who've been talking about free speech for 10 years only to then, when they have power, deport people for what they have said? I would not have predicted that, never in a million years. And so I do have to be forced to accept some of your own criticism of what you're saying.
I'm just saying, like Donald Trump said to Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg, Zuckerbucks is what threw the election. And so if he tries that again, I'm going to put him in jail.
Uh-huh.
I said that to Elon Musk. I said, so you said free speech is your line. You're supporting a guy who's literally threatened to jail somebody if they exercise their free speech, while you're, as a social media mogul, doing far more direct electioneering, giving away $1 million here, setting up an algorithm that favors conservative content. How can you justify that? And he says, oh, Trump is that's just talk. So I guess my point is, you see the clues you want to see, Krystal, and the same could be said from the left. If somebody was saying, yeah, man, I'm going to open all the borders, and then that's what happens, and you say, wouldn't you say, well, they said it. How can you pretend that they did?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think to me, it's not just about listening to the rhetoric. It's also looking at the actions. And, I mean, look, it's no secret. Trump behaves like an authoritarian. He does it in his business. He did it in Trump 1.0. He wanted to shoot protesters in the knees. That's hardly pro-First Amendment, pro-free speech type of activity. And on anti-Semitism specifically, I mean, there's always been, even at the height of, we're pro-free speech, et cetera, there's always been a carve-out for Israel. I mean, just look at these anti-BDS laws across the country. Look at the number of professors who had their careers attacked by, free speech maven Barry Weiss as one example. So there's always been a carve-out there because it's about protecting Israel, and it's also about, a lot of the influence they've successfully been able to wield, which is not unique to the Israel lobby, but is very central to the way that our politics ultimately operate.
I totally agree.
Saagar, you were going to say something. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I honestly don't even remember.
That's a perfect place to stop.
Hold on, Jon. If I don't say that my husband, Kyle Kulinski, wants you to run for president and is your biggest booster, then he's going to divorce me. So,
oh dear God, don't let the divorce. Oh, I so want you two to work out, but I don't want
to. Come on, the country needs you, Jon.
Saagar, who you got? Who are you? Do you guys talk about in your mind? Is there a leader that you think could arise that could put behind us this weaponized environment we currently live in, run on a platform of sane policy, competently executed? Do you think they could do that? And is there someone out there that you view as having that potential?
There is an agenda for the taking for someone. I don't know who that someone is.
No question. Certainly on the left, it's wide open.
There is an agenda for the taking that is about economic populism, yes. It's about pushing back against the tech oligarchs, fighting back against these data centers that are taking over communities and which are hated by left, right, center, doesn't matter. About a foreign policy, which is about investing in America rather than fighting these horrific, immoral foreign wars and backstopping a genocide. To me, there is a broad FDR-style coalition that is there for the taking. If you have the right person who has credibility in expressing those values in the right way.
Saagar?
I don't know about a specific person. I do have a general kind of theory. I love to read history books, is that we talked about the 60s and the 70s. And one of the most unique parts of Jimmy Carter's rise is that if you had gone a few years before, nobody would have predicted that somebody like him could have been elected. Now, let's ignore how he actually governed and kind of the promise of Carter itself.
It was an oil shock. Saagar, come on, man.
All right. Yeah, sure. It wasn't just
he
oil.
didn't know.
But I do think a really interesting idea is that the Trump era began with the escalator. The celebrity politics era began with Obama. That we've now lived with 20 so years of celebrity politics. That an inevitable swing back would be to the type of thing you're talking about. An executive, a level of seriousness, an anti-charisma, a level of like nerdish, ness, almost in the way that Carter's sheer moral impeachability was so important to the country in a post-Watergate, post-Nixon, post-LBJ environment.
Governor of Iowa type dude. Governor of Iowa type.
But with the right politics. So that's the key. The key to those two things is many of what Krystal just said.
And the right ability to communicate those politics.
Yes,
I think there might be some people that exist without that.
If you put those together, the country is desperate for genuine leadership.
Desperate.
That's what I think.
So thirsty. Final question. Trump famously chose the escalator, which to me is maybe the least authoritative mode of transportation there is. It's literally... It's gravity, and you don't even have to move your legs.
But it's cinematic. Yeah.
You're heading down. What would be that for our next great leader? What would be the mode of conveyance that they could choose? Would it be people mover, chariot? What? Anything?
The Segway.
They should announce it on Breaking Points. Breaking Points. That's what they should call it. Yeah. That's
majestic.
Yeah.
The final
entrance.
plug.
Yeah.
The final damn plug. I can't thank you guys enough. Krystal Ball and Saagar Enjeti of Breaking Points. Please check out the show because it is, and I don't say this lightly, good faith conversation that you may not agree with some of it. You may have arguments, but it never feels cynical. It never feels manipulated, and it never feels performative.
That's extremely kind, John.
And I really do appreciate that for the both of you. It's not an easy trick to pull.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Means a lot coming from you, John. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
My last plug, my parents adore you.
I love them.
I think my mom met you in an airport once. And so
Wait, for real?
Yes. She said you were extremely kind to her. So thank you. And I was in the front row at the Rally to Restore Sanity at age 18 while I was in college.
Did it work? Did we restore the sanity,
it
John?
didn't work.
Clearly didn't take.
But I was there.
Thank you guys both for being with us. Folks, I am nothing if not a generator of ideas that may never work. Obviously, we've talked a little bit on the show about the crumple, which is the portable dog bed that you throw on the ground that makes a different topographical shape each time you do it. Think of it as the way your dog likes to sit on your coat, although officially a more dog appropriate blanket type thing hasn't come into production or fruition yet. But this Shopify thing, if you've got an idea, if you're somebody that always thinks, it would be a great business, this is the thing that makes it work, makes it ready to go from day one. And I don't know how they did it. I think with zeros and ones, I don't know how this works, to be honest with you. I don't know how computers work in general or apps work. Zeros and ones, and then you feed it into a box where I guess 8 brilliant gerbils live and they do the rest of the work. I have no idea. It's easy to design your shop. It's easy to get paid. They handle the checkout process. You might think to yourself like, how are they going to complete their purchase? Shopify handles it. Gets them to come back as repeat customers. Setup and checkout are all handled. So get Shopify, for God's sakes. With Shopify, nothing stands between your idea and a real business. So go make it one. Start your free trial at shopify.com/TWS. Start your free trial at shopify.com/TWS. You can so tell Saagar's parents do not agree with him, but he's learned the gentle art of accepting his parents' wrongness, but dealing with them in a kind way. Like, I can't tell you how many times he said to me, like, I see how you got there. Well, I can understand why you might think that, but like that is a guy trying to get through the weekend he is spending at home.
I'm gonna steal some of those like rhetorical flourishes.
Right?
Yeah, that's he has the patience, first of all, I was saying. Like
Fantastic.
it's really admirable what he
Yes.
does. And what they both do, but what he did in this conversation, because it was a bit of 2-on-1. So shout out to Saagar.
I did feel bad on that. There was a certain point, but when he would say like, it's not cynical, and I'd be like, come on, God,
You can help
Saagar,
yourself. Yeah.
how can it not be cynical?
Yeah. When he said they love how much it drives you crazy, that really hit me because I was like, so that's why my family behaves this way in the group chat. Last week I
Really?
left the group chat because they're just like the memes, the Fauci shit. Oh my God. It just like surged and I was like, I'm out. I can't.
I've highly suspected for years that this was all just to own the libs, and just for that to be confirmed in that moment was gratifying, but also really upsetting.
Yeah.
Right. But it's also, in some ways, it's verified my decision to never join group chats.
Oh, yeah.
I do not have, there are no long strain. The largest group chat I have is literally with the guys that I play music with.
Okay, that's a reasonable number.
There's 4 of us.
Yeah.
And the only discussions are, the discussions are always like, Tuesday night?
And then it's a bunch of thumbs ups.
What about Wednesday? Right. Can't. It's that. There's not a lot of, fuck COVID, like none of that stuff.
I see where you're
mostly-
coming from.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Brittany, what do we got on this, our final episode of the summer?
Okay, John, do you think the White House press corps is cool with taking a bullet or a surface-to-air missile for Trump?
Absolutely. Of course, they would say to themselves, if we can be the decoy, if killing us makes you safe, however that would be. Do you want one of us to put on the Trump wig? Do you want us to put on the red tie and do that?
I'll jump in front of the catering cart myself.
Sure.
Whatever it is you want us to do, sir. Do you want us to taste your food to make sure that it is in no way contaminated? Although now, with Kennedy running HHS, you don't know if it's contaminated because of a foreign act of assassination or there's just diarrhea parasites and everything.
Common misconception.
That was a wild story. Although Caitlin Collins, again, because Caitlin Collins, she does her research, she says, that is not unprecedented that a president has had to change plans based on a certain threat. And it wasn't until afterwards that it was explained to the people who remained on the targeted conveyance. Hey, by the way, just wanted to let you guys know, now that we're here safely, there were a lot of lasers being pointed and we weren't sure which one was.
It's so fucking crazy. Also, the irony of it being a catering truck is just like...
It's just like what's always in the movies, too. They're like, how do we get you out of here? And then there's like a little catering cart and you're like, oh, it's perfect.
Here's the question. Did he have to put on the cater waiter outfit?
He had a disguise. He dressed as a bellhop.
Put on the
They
thing.
got him out.
Actually, here's what they did. They brought him in on the big table and it had the little cloche on it. And then they pulled it in. They got the table to the safe location and then they lifted the cloche. Are you okay now, Mr. President? And they put it back down and then
It's
moved
just
him
such
along.
a screwball comedy. It's perfect.
Isn't it? It's
Yeah.
very Clouseau.
I
Yes.
also love him saying, if I go, you go, afterwards. And it's like, actually, not the case.
Actually, that was if they go, they go.
Yeah.
Correct.
If I go,
Yeah.
I go. You stay.
Right. If I go, I go, and you don't go.
You go, bye-bye.
Yeah, you go bye-bye. That's for sure.
Yeah.
What else they got?
All right. John, whose weave is better, Trump or Fetterman?
Oh, whose weaves?
Well, weave or weave.
Well, yeah, I was going to say Fetterman. No, I mean, Fetterman, I think, gave up on whatever hairstyle. Trump at least is experimenting. That's kind of what I dig about him. Like with Trump, you literally could imagine, like, where was he this morning? And somebody be like, I think the beauty parlor. Like because he's got a hairdo now that's like when when I was younger, all the old ladies would go to this guy, Joe. It was the beauty parlor, and Joe would be at the beauty parlor and he would take care of the ladies. And he's got that, like, I imagine Trump sitting under that little dome after
Yeah.
getting his thing up and just coming out and going like, oh my God, wait till I
Yeah.
play bridge. Trump is the master of the weave because he's in control of it. Fetterman, unfortunately, I think, look, to be fair to him, like, he had a stroke. I do think that creates processing issues. I don't think it's a great environment for him in long form necessarily. I don't want to lay all of it on that because I don't think all of it should be laid on that. But I definitely think he may have a more thoughtful mode of communicating that we are not necessarily privy to. If that would be, is that the nicest way to say it? Fairest way to say it?
It is.
I would say it's too generous, in fact.
I'm not suggesting that the opinions should not be criticized and looked at with astonishment, because I do think they are his real opinions. I just think I don't know if that was necessarily his best at defending them. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
I haven't seen better, and I did look around quite a bit. So I haven't seen him articulate the point better than he did.
All right.
I actually think I think Fetterman is taking like some of Trump's playbook where it's like when he's talking to some of the media, just like completely throwing lobs back. Like when I think it was Dropsite like caught him in the hallway and was asking him questions about Israel. And he was like, who do you work for? Like, that's not a real organization.
Oh,
like,
right. You know what? Yeah, I'm giving him too much credit. I am giving him too much credit.
But I think that's like he's, copying Trump a little bit. Like, I see there's some tendencies there.
Right.
But yeah.
I think it's because in the conversation, like, I did get to a place where I felt bad. I know that's not, he's a senator. There's no amount of having that, but having diminished ability, but having power not be diminished, that's a scary place for people to be. But it's hard not to, on a human level, have a conversation at that length with somebody in that situation where you don't go like, oh, it's like, I have to not, let me just not be.
Yeah. I think that you have to, I think it's really good to like hold space for that kind of empathy. But
Whoa. Did you say hold? I've never heard hold space used before in a non.
But I don't know that it's warranted necessarily.
Yeah, I agree. And the reason why it's not warranted is the amount of power that the individual wields. In the same way for Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
Where you can go like, wow, that must suck to be infirmed to the point where you literally can't be filmed saying you're okay.
Yeah.
And then also think to yourself, fuck that guy for still having that much power.
Yeah.
100%.
Right. I feel better. Thank you for helping me work through this. Because I was feeling guilty.
You shouldn't.
I can't not
think
think that I was feeling a bit guilty. That's all.
No.
All right. What's fun?
Resolved. Last one, John. Please settle this for me and my wife.
Done. I can do that. No problem.
McDonald's fries or Burger King onion rings?
McDonald's fries.
Yeah.
They're why would anybody even?
Yeah.
Why would someone throw that even into the Burger King onion ring is not, I don't believe is in the same weight class. That's like, Manchester City or, somebody, the Galaxy. Like, it's not even.
They can do a friendly every now and again,
right.
but they shouldn't be competing.
Thank you, Julian. A friendly. They can play, and you know what? We'll even pretend that we're going to referee it. But we all know what the real situation is. Now, the McDonald's fry, I will say this. My view on the size of McDonald's fry has changed over the years. In the old days, if you would supersize a fry or get me the largest container of fries that they will allow me to take out of the restaurant.
Yes.
Do you have bucket o fry? May I have a bucket? How about this? I'll hold my arms like this and you load it with fry. And I will walk out with, you know what I'll have? The sack o fries. Like a little Santa sack filled with fries.
Yeah.
As I have gotten older, I can actually feel the amount of salt enter my body and slowly begin to change
Oh,
the
no.
chemical makeup of what I'm experiencing, and I can't do it.
Oh, that sucks just to know that that's coming.
Yeah.
Oh, it's coming.
Nothing hits like a medium French fry and a medium Diet Coke. Though.
Yeah.
Oh, but now you say
Oh.
medium French fry. That is a respectable amount of fry. But the large fry, 3/4 of the way through, I think to myself, I believe I'm having a pulmonary embolism.
I'll eat a bucket of fries for the both of us, John.
Thank you so much. And I miss it. You know what I've taken to doing at times? You get the fries and you do this. You ever do-
No.
Yeah.
No.
I get the fries and I do this with a little
Oh
salt
no.
shaker.
I have to clear out whatever they put
That's
on there.
dark.
Wait, have you had a Burger King onion ring?
Oh, sure.
I don't
Oh,
like onion
listen.
rings.
I've traveled. Is that what you're asking me?
Has he traveled the world? Of course he has.
Am I a bon vivant? Am I a sophisticate? Of course I've had the and I've by the way, I've even had when they try shit like let's do cheesy tots. Like when they'll introduce new fried items or things like that. I'll try them all.
Why not?
I'll try the Cinnabon with the little frosting in the center of it.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
Fucking Taco Bell tried to throw out a chocolate empanada for a little while.
Yeah.
Sort of like a Choco Taco.
I always
take that.
wondered who
Thank you
those
for that.
advertisements worked on.
You're looking at him.
Me, I'll try them all. I'll throw, but I am always searching for the perfection of. In my old days, when I ate red meat, the McDonald's cheeseburger, a large fry, Coke, and an apple pie.
Oh.
That was the quintessential American lab made. I'm sure it was made in like the same lab where you made creepy crawlies, where you poured the stuff into the thing and then you heated it up and out came a worm. I'm
Yep.
sure it was the same lab. The 60s and 70s were nothing if not monosodium glutamate and whatever else they could throw in there.
They figured it out.
So good. All right. Well, that's all for us. And this is it. The show, we are done until when? Do you know when the next one is? September?
September 10th.
Thursday. We'll be out on a Thursday that week.
Switching it up.
We're switching it up September 10th. To all the people that have been listening throughout the year, thank you all so much for doing so. We're excited to come back in September and infuriate you even further. As always, we could not do it without our exceptional team. And we have added a new team member, I would like to say. A new associate producer by the name of Rebecca Rotenberg. She'll be joining us, doing a wonderful job. But our producer, Brittany Mehmetovic, our producer, Jillian Spear, our video editor and engineer, Rob Vitolo, who made a headroom call today that I thought was well worth it. I got a little lax, and I came in hot with a shit ton of headroom. And Rob said, not on my watch, my friend. Not going to happen. Audio editor and engineer, Nicole Boyce. Associate producer, Rebecca Rotenberg, as we mentioned earlier. And our executive producers, Chris McShane and Katie Gray. Thank you guys so much, and we shall see you in September. The Weekly Show with Jon Stewart is a Comedy Central podcast that's produced by Paramount Audio and Busboy Productions.